Roman Empire, Episode 12. The Price of Empire. How Rome's conquests changed Roman society. Part 1. Opening. The cost of winning. Rome had won. That was the simple story. Carthage was broken. Macedonia was humbled. Greece had entered Rome's orbit. Kings listened when Roman envoys spoke. Cities watched the Senate's decisions with fear and calculation. By the middle of the 2nd century BCE, Rome was no longer just an Italian power. It had become the dominant force of the Mediterranean world. But history often hides its deepest turning points inside victories. The question was no longer whether Rome could defeat its enemies. Rome had already answered that. The question was what victory would do to Rome itself. Every conquered land sent something back to the city: silver, grain, slaves, art, taxes, ambitions, and new ideas. The Mediterranean was flowing into Rome like a river. At first it looked like glory, then slowly it began to look like pressure. Empire did not arrive as one clear decision. No Roman assembly voted to become the master of the Mediterranean. No senator stood up and announced that the Republic would now rule peoples from Spain to Greece and beyond. Instead, empire grew through war, treaty, revenge, fear, opportunity, and habit. Rome solved one problem, then inherited 3 more. It defeated one enemy, then had to govern the land left behind. Tonight, we look at the price of that process. This is not only a story about money, it is a story about land, labor, politics, morality, and memory. It is about farmers who fought for Rome and returned to ruined fields. It is about enslaved people brought from conquered territories into Italian estates. It is about senators who grew rich from provinces. It is about generals whose victories gave them fame larger than the offices they held. It is about a republic built for a city, now trying to manage an empire. And that is the hook of this episode. Rome conquered the Mediterranean, but the Mediterranean began to conquer Rome from within. The price of empire was not paid all at once. It was paid slowly, in small farms lost, in crowded streets, in corrupted courts, in frightened allies, in restless soldiers, and in a new political language where wealth and power became harder to separate. Rome had won the world around it. Now it had to survive what winning had created. Part 2. From city-state to Mediterranean power. The Roman Republic had not been designed for empire. Its institutions were old, respected, and deeply rooted in tradition. Consuls led armies. The Senate advised and guided policy. Assemblies voted. Magistrates served limited terms. Families competed for honor. Religion, law, and custom gave public life a sense of order. This system had worked remarkably well when Rome was a city-state expanding through Italy. It had adapted through struggle. It had absorbed allies, negotiated obligations, and built a military machine based on citizen service. Rome's strength came from its ability to mobilize people, endure losses, and return to war again and again. But governing Italy was not the same as governing the Mediterranean. After the Punic Wars, Rome controlled territories beyond Italy in new ways. Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, parts of Spain, and later Macedonia and Africa became provinces. A province was not simply a conquered region, it was an administrative responsibility. Rome had to send governors, collect taxes, maintain order, manage disputes, and protect its interests. This created new opportunities for Roman elites. A man who held office in Rome might later govern a province. In theory, he represented Roman law and authority. In practice, provincial command could become a path to wealth. Governors could exploit local communities through taxes, requisitions, legal pressure, and military authority. Not every governor was corrupt, but the system invited abuse. The provinces also changed Roman politics because they expanded the rewards of office. In the older republic, political honor mattered greatly, but the material scale was smaller. Now office could lead to command abroad, and command abroad could lead to money, clients, contracts, and glory. Public service and private enrichment began to stand dangerously close together. Rome still spoke the language of duty. But empire made duty profitable. This was one of the first great prices of empire. The Republic's offices became more valuable than before. And when offices become more valuable, competition for them becomes harsher. Men who once competed for honor now competed for access to the resources of the world. The Republic had conquered provinces, but the provinces had changed the meaning of Roman ambition. Part 3. Wealth enters Rome. Conquest brought wealth into Rome on a scale earlier generations could hardly imagine. Victorious generals returned with treasure, temples received gifts, public buildings rose. Aristocratic houses filled with Greek statues, Eastern luxury goods, fine furniture, precious metals, and educated slaves. Rome became richer, but not evenly richer. The profits of empire flowed first toward those who already had power: senators, commanders, contractors, financiers, and landowners. The Roman state benefited from tribute and taxes, but private men also learned how to grow wealthy from public victory. War created opportunities. Provinces created opportunities. Tax collection created opportunities. Contracts for supplies, roads, armies, and administration created opportunities. This was especially important for the equestrian order, the wealthy class below the senatorial elite. Many equities became involved in business, contracting, and tax farming. Tax farmers, known as publicani, could bid for the right to collect taxes in provinces. If they paid Rome a fixed amount and collected more from the province, the difference became profit. This system encouraged efficiency, but it also encouraged harshness. For provincial communities, Roman rule could feel distant and unpredictable. A city might suffer from a greedy governor, aggressive tax collectors, legal confusion, or the demands of armies passing through. Rome presented itself as a bringer of order, but order was often expensive for the people being ordered. Inside Rome, wealth changed social expectations. The old ideal of simplicity remained powerful in speeches and moral stories. Romans still praised ancestors who lived modestly and served the state. But daily life among the elite began to look different. Banquets became more elaborate, houses became grander, Greek art became fashionable, education became more refined. Luxury, once criticized as foreign weakness, became part of elite competition. This created anxiety. Conservative Romans feared that empire was softening the old character of the Republic. They worried that Greek culture, Eastern wealth, and private luxury would weaken discipline. They feared that Rome might win wars while losing the moral habits that made victory possible. Their fear was not only cultural, it was political. A society with too much unequal wealth becomes unstable. The rich can buy influence, the poor can become dependent. Elections become more expensive, public life becomes more theatrical. The distance between Roman ideals and Roman reality grows wider. Empire made Rome magnificent. It also made Rome more unequal. Part 4. The slave economy and the latifundia. One of the darkest prices of empire was slavery. Rome had practiced slavery long before it became a Mediterranean empire. But conquest expanded slavery enormously. Wars produced captives. Captives were sold. Markets filled with people taken from Spain, Greece, Macedonia, Africa, Asia Minor, and other regions touched by Roman power. These enslaved people entered homes, workshops, mines, farms, and estates across Roman territory. In Italy, many wealthy landowners used enslaved labor on large estates called latifundia. These estates could produce wine, olive oil, grain, and livestock on a scale that small farmers could not easily match. With enough land and enough enslaved labor, aristocrats could turn conquest into agricultural profit. This transformed the Italian countryside. The old Roman ideal celebrated the independent farmer-soldier, but in many regions, small farms came under pressure. Some citizens had been away for years fighting Rome's wars. Others fell into debt. Some sold their land to wealthy neighbors. Some could not compete with large estates worked by enslaved labor. Over time, many rural citizens drifted toward Rome and other cities in search of work, food, and protection. The social meaning was enormous. The small landholding citizen had been the moral and military foundation of the Republic. He was the man who owned land, served in the army, raised a family, and felt that the Republic was his possession as much as anyone's. If that class weakened, Rome's political balance weakened with it. Slavery also carried danger for the enslavers. A society dependent on forced labor lives with fear beneath its wealth. Enslaved people resisted in many ways: escape, sabotage, refusal, and sometimes revolt. In Sicily, where large estates and brutal conditions were common, slave uprisings would shake Roman confidence. These revolts reminded Rome that the labor system feeding elite wealth was built on violence. The price of empire was therefore paid by the enslaved first and most cruelly. But it was also paid by Roman citizens who lost land, by communities that lost stability, and by a republic that began to forget the connection between military service, citizenship, and independence. Rome had conquered millions of acres, yet many Romans owned less than before. Part 5. The urban poor and the crowding of Rome. As land changed hands, Rome itself changed shape. The city grew larger, louder, and more crowded. People came looking for work, grain, opportunity, legal help, political protection, or simply survival. Some were citizens who had lost land, some were freedmen, some were foreigners, some were enslaved, some were merchants, craftsmen, laborers, or dependents of powerful patrons. Rome was becoming a capital of empire before it had the infrastructure of an imperial capital. The city's growth created problems of housing, food supply, sanitation, employment, and public order. Many poorer residents lived in crowded apartment blocks, often unstable and dangerous. Work could be irregular. Fire, disease, and hunger were constant threats. The wealth of empire was visible in temples, triumphs, and aristocratic houses, but poverty lived beside it. This changed politics. A larger urban population meant larger crowds, and crowds mattered in the Roman Republic. Assemblies, elections, trials, funerals, games, and public speeches all took place in a political culture where presence was power. A leader who could speak to the people, feed them, entertain them, or promise them relief could become dangerous to the Senate. Patronage became even more important. Poor citizens might depend on wealthy patrons for support, legal assistance, or food. In return, patrons expected loyalty, public presence, and votes. The relationship was traditional, but empire made it larger and more intense. Politics became personal, social, and economic all at once. The grain supply became a central issue. A city as large as Rome could not simply feed itself from nearby farms. It depended increasingly on grain from Sicily, Sardinia, North Africa, and other territories. This made Rome powerful, but also vulnerable. Control of grain meant control of stability. A hungry city was a dangerous city. Here we see another price of empire. Rome became dependent on the lands it had conquered. The provinces fed the city. Enslaved labor enriched estates, taxes funded ambitions. Foreign wars shaped domestic politics. The line between Rome and its empire disappeared. The Republic was no longer governing from the center. The center was being reshaped by everything it governed. Part 6. Allies, citizenship, and the burden of service. Empire also raised a difficult question: who truly belonged to Rome? For centuries, Rome had relied on Italian allies. These communities supplied soldiers, resources, and loyalty. They fought beside Roman legions in major wars. They suffered losses in campaigns that expanded Roman power. Without the allies, Rome could not have defeated Carthage or built its Mediterranean dominance. But many Italian allies did not possess full Roman citizenship. This created a growing tension. The allies carried many of the burdens of empire, but did not enjoy all the privileges of Roman citizens. They served in war. They helped secure victories, yet political power remained concentrated in Roman hands. The rewards of empire were not shared equally. At first, this imbalance could be managed through tradition, local autonomy, and practical benefits. Rome's alliance system had always been flexible, but as Rome became richer and more powerful, inequality became harder to ignore. If Italian soldiers fought for Roman greatness, why should they remain outside the full Roman political community? The citizenship question would not explode immediately, but it became one of the great unresolved problems of the late Republic. Reformers would return to it. Allies would grow more frustrated. Eventually, the issue would help produce the Social War, one of the most important internal conflicts in Roman history. This was another price of empire. Expansion forced Rome to define belonging. A small republic can limit citizenship more easily. A Mediterranean power cannot avoid the question forever. When many peoples fight, pay, farm, trade, and suffer for a state, they eventually ask what the state owes them. Rome had always been unusually successful at incorporating outsiders compared with many ancient societies, but empire stretched that gift to its limits. The more Rome expanded, the more complicated Roman identity became. Was Rome a city? Was it Italy? Was it a ruling people? Was it a legal status? Was it a shared civilization? These questions would shape the next centuries. For now, they remained open wounds beneath Roman success. Part 7. Corruption, governors, and provincial suffering. For the peoples of the provinces, Roman rule could bring peace after war. It could reduce piracy, stabilize trade, settle disputes, and protect cities from rival kings or local enemies. Rome's power was not always experienced only as destruction. Some communities benefited from Roman order, especially when compared with constant warfare. But the same system also created exploitation. Provincial governors held enormous authority. They commanded troops, judged legal cases, collected resources, and represented Rome's will. Their terms were usually limited, which created a dangerous temptation. A governor had only a short time to enrich himself before returning home. If he was greedy, the province might suffer severely. Provincials could complain, but justice was difficult. A governor belonged to Rome's ruling class. His judges might be other Romans from similar backgrounds. Witnesses had to travel. Local communities had to spend money and political energy to accuse a powerful man. Even when a trial happened, conviction was not guaranteed. This damaged Rome's reputation. The Republic claimed to rule through law, discipline, and justice. But if provincial subjects experienced Roman law as a tool of extraction, then Rome's moral authority weakened. A state can win obedience through fear, but fear alone is expensive to maintain. Corruption also fed domestic politics. A governor who returned with wealth could use it in Rome. He could fund public games, support clients, build monuments, influence elections, and strengthen his family's position. Money taken abroad became power at home. Power at home then led to new commands abroad. This circular relationship between empire and ambition became one of the Republic's great dangers. The old Roman elite had always competed for honor. But now, honor could be financed by provincial exploitation. A man's dignity, fame, and future might depend on wealth extracted far from the eyes of ordinary citizens. The suffering of a Spanish town or Greek city could become an aristocrat's political career. The price of empire was therefore moral as well as economic. Rome had to ask whether it ruled for order or for profit. Too often, the answer depended on the man sent to govern. Part 8. Triumph, Glory, and the New Roman Ambition. The Roman triumph was one of the most powerful ceremonies in the Republic. A victorious general entered the city in splendor. Captives, treasure, weapons, paintings, and symbols of conquered lands moved through the streets. The general rode like a figure between man and God, honored by the people, watched by the Senate, and reminded that all glory was temporary. In earlier centuries, triumph celebrated service to the Republic, but as empire expanded, triumph became part of a larger competition among elites. A general who conquered new territory could become a legend. His name could dominate public memory. His family could gain prestige for generations. His soldiers might become personally loyal. His wealth could reshape politics. This changed ambition. A Roman noble did not simply want office. He wanted a province, an army, a victory, a triumph, and a place in history. Military command became the fastest road to greatness. But when military glory becomes central to political identity, the Republic must be careful. Armies can serve the state, but they can also serve the men who lead them. In episode 12, we are not yet at the age of Marius, Sulla, Pompey, and Caesar, but we can already see the road forming. Empire created distant commands. Distant commands created famous generals. Famous generals returned with money, veterans, and influence. The Republic's institutions still expected temporary magistrates, but empire was producing men whose power could outgrow temporary office. The culture of glory was not new. Rome had always honored courage and victory. What changed was the scale. A victory in an Italian war was one thing. A victory in Spain, Africa, Greece, or Asia was something larger. The world had become the stage on which Roman aristocrats competed. This is one of the quiet transformations of the Republic. Rome's leaders learned to think in Mediterranean terms, but its constitution still belonged to an older city-state world. The mismatch would become more dangerous with every generation. The empire made Rome great. It also made individual Romans too great for the Republic to easily contain. Part 9. Conclusion. The empire comes home. At the beginning of this episode, we asked what victory did to Rome. The answer is not simple, because empire did not destroy the Republic immediately. In many ways, it made Rome stronger. It brought wealth, security, prestige, grain, roads, trade, and cultural exchange. It made Rome the center of a wider world. But it also changed the Republic's foundations. The small farmer weakened, the slave economy expanded, large estates grew, provinces were exploited, the urban poor became more important in politics. Italian allies questioned their place, governors returned rich, generals dreamed bigger dreams. The Senate tried to manage a world far larger than the old Republic had been designed to govern. This is the callback to our hook. Rome conquered the Mediterranean, but the Mediterranean began to conquer Rome from within. Not with armies, not with elephants, not with phalanxes, but with wealth, inequality, ambition, dependence, and the slow corrosion of old limits. The price of empire was hidden inside success. A poor citizen walking through Rome might see temples built from foreign treasure and wonder why his own life felt less secure. A senator might praise ancient simplicity while dining beside Greek statues and imported luxury. A provincial city might hear Roman speeches about justice while paying the price of Roman greed. An Italian ally might fight under Roman command and still remain outside full citizenship. An enslaved person might labor on land once farmed by free citizens. All of them lived inside the same contradiction. Rome was becoming the ruler of the world, but it had not yet learned how to rule itself under the weight of that world. This tension will shape the next stage of our story, because when social pressure grows, reformers rise. When reformers challenge privilege, the powerful resist. And when political compromise fails, violence begins to appear. In the next episode, we will meet two brothers who try to answer the problems we have seen tonight, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They came from Rome's elite, but they saw the suffering beneath Roman greatness. Their reforms would make them heroes to some, enemies to others, and symbols of a republic beginning to break. For now, remember the quiet lesson of episode 12. Empire is never only foreign, it always comes home. Rome won lands, treasure, slaves, taxes, and glory. But every victory returned to the city carrying a question Rome could not avoid forever. Who pays for greatness? If this episode helped you understand the hidden cost behind Rome's rise, subscribe to Learn While Sleeping and continue the journey through the rise and fall of Rome.